middle school is one of the first times and maybe the most crucial season where they're really beginning to form their identity and who am I really and does anybody like me and they're starting to pay attention maybe for the first real time. For some of them it's happened earlier depending on how they are developmentally, but wow. Okay. Well, hey everybody, welcome. This almost sounds like the theme song of a 80s high school movie with like new wave music in the background.
I was at the Angel game yesterday, and I'm just imagining that it's sort of our walk-up.
Oh, it'd be
Yeah,
good. No,
we're
that
getting
it's
pumped
good.
up for the game.
Yes,
I like
it's
it,
good
yeah.
walk-up
Thank you.
music.
That's exactly what it is.
Walk-up music?
Yeah, man. We're walking up to the plate.
Okay.
And we're,
Our guest today gets producer Chris.
I
He's
think
vibing.
the concept of people choosing their own walk-up music is genius.
It is.
I think like where was that when we were playing high school
I know.
baseball and stuff?
We're literally in our seats and asking each. It was a topic of conversation. What would your walk-up music be?
Oh, well.
And everybody pulls out
man.
Spotify, pulls up
Yeah.
the track. This is what I'd walk.
What
up.
would yours be?
There's this version of like Ready or Not, like the Ready or Not. I'm not. Boy, I'm gonna ruin the episode. But it's sort of like turned sort of techno, and it's really cool, strong. That would be mine.
Mine would be Back in Black, AC/DC.
There you go.
oh, mine would be Wild Thing.
Grace?
No, probably something, I don't know, Disney.
Grace, do you understand the concept of walk-up music?
Someone at the game yesterday didn't because they said, "Oh, there you go."
Yes, that's it. That's totally my vibe. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of our On Purpose Parents podcast. As always, I am Kurt Johnson with my amazing co-host,
Grace.
Grace Yoon. Over in the corner off camera, if you're watching, is producer Chris.
Chris.
And if you're watching and if you're listening, sitting right here, center camera is this week's guest, Jason Williams, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
So excited.
So, as most listeners know, we are in a 5 or 10 week, 10 episode series where we are interviewing parents who are in the various stages of parenting with different roles and goals of parenting based on our On Purpose Parents strategy that we allude to here and there in the podcast. If you're not aware of what that is and all that, you can go back to episode number. I have no idea, producer Chris. You
Yeah, we don't
early
keep track
one.
of the
I
episode
don't know.
numbers.
Go back somewhere in there. We introduced and did an entire episode on the On Purpose Parent strategy that you can find.
Yes.
But basically, the concept is that as parents, we want our goal as parenting, as we've defined it for our podcast, is to raise our children to be interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution. That's our job. That's the. If they go to college, good for them. That's awesome. If they become an actress or a lawyer or a doctor, amazing. If they make the sports team that they want to make when they're in high school, good for them. That is all secondary when it comes to what is our ultimate goal as parents, is to raise interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution. And along the way, we go through different ages and stages of parenting, and we have different roles and goals. And that's what we're dedicating this series to, is we're asking parents who are in unique ages and stages with that particular role and goal. And so, Grace, you can talk about our guest and let him talk about himself, and we'll jump into it.
Yeah, and I just have to say, I've been loving these series because of having guests, because hearing real life stories of parents and their kids, I think helps all the things that we're talking about, the On Purpose Parent Plan, the ages and stages, the roles and goals. It just brings it to life a little bit more and a little less theoretical and more like, this is what I'm really going through. And I think that's been so relatable, at least for me, and I know it will be for our listeners as well. So with that said, can you introduce yourself to our listeners, share who you are, what you do, and maybe introduce your family?
Yeah, so my name is Jason Williams. I am on staff here at Saddleback, the executive pastor of ministries, just bringing some alignment and leadership to all of our ministry areas across our church. I've been married to my wife Joy for it'll be 24 years this September, which is amazing. Hey.
I don't know, producer Chris. That sounds more like a 25-year sound effect.
We need a
I
24-year
don't know
one.
what the 24-year sound effect is.
And the timing of being here as a guest is actually really interesting because tomorrow, this is a big birthday weekend in our house.
Okay.
Tomorrow, my daughter turns 13.
Oh man,
That's a big one.
The next day, my son turns 16.
what? One day apart.
So they're one day, just one day shy of 3 years apart exactly. So we have one becoming a teenager for the first time, and the other hitting 16.
Sweet
Wow.
16.
So we are in. I don't have an elementary school kid anymore,
right?
Yeah.
and that messes with you a little bit.
Is Karsten, is he a chomping at the bit to get his driver's license teenager, or more of a not all that concerned about it?
He's a chomping at the bit to get his license teenager. However, he messed around and didn't get his permit in the 6-month lead time, so he's not going to get it until July. And that didn't matter all that much 4 months ago, but to this here in 2 days, it's going to matter to him
For
a lot.
sure.
Yeah.
Does it matter to you and Joy? Like,
Yes.
dang it, why are we driving you around for 6 more months?
100%.
Oh,
it does.
really?
Yeah. We would love to hand him the keys and
Oh,
say,
wow.
you want to. It feels like sometimes we're out like almost every night,
Right.
taking them somewhere.
Yeah.
So to have a little help with that, some
That's
reinforcements,
true.
we're
For
looking
sure.
forward to that.
Oh, that's true.
Very
But
cool.
for kids for parents with kids my age, it still seems terrifying. Like,
I-
what?
I get it.
You want to give your keys to your kids? Because
Right.
that just seems terrifying.
And he's actually a pretty good cautious driver, so that helps
that's
us
good.
with
Yeah,
the
that's
terror.
cool. Well, and we could go. It'd be so fun someday to do an episode on this concept. But the cool thing about driver's licenses nowadays is more than ever, it's one of the last remaining like true rites of passage.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's lost that luster, which is why some kids, they get their license when they're 17 and a half. They're not that concerned about it. But man, when we were teenagers,
Right.
holy smoke, I got mine, I think, on my 16th birthday because I was ready to roll. I was looking forward to it. It was this rite of passage. Like now I'm freedom and all
Yeah.
the things, right?
Yeah, that's true. I was ready to roll too, but then I failed my first test.
Oh,
so,
no.
Ooh, yeah.
so anyway,
We incentivized him too. We this year we've been telling him as we're doing things, hey, this is the last time we're going to do this.
Yep.
So next year at this time, either you have your license or you're lining up your own rides.
Right.
So we've incentivized him
Oh, that's
to
good. That's
be a little
smart.
proactive
Yeah.
in taking
You're,
that step.
Smart.
you're buying your own bus pass.
That's right.
Well, we're super excited to have you on. Thank you for joining us, and we're
Of course. Thanks for having
very
me.
looking forward to hearing your stories and your thoughts. But before we do, we'd like to play a little icebreaker activity with our guests, and
Oh.
it's a game that we think kids like. And so, as a podcast on parenting, we
Yeah.
also try to connect with what our kids are doing as well.
I'm
so
intrigued.
I'm gonna pull out this.
The pot of perplexity. The crock of conundrums.
Do I need to hold it up
The
there?
receptacle of riddles.
I wasn't
Okay.
worried about this.
Urn of
until just
ulcers.
now.
or
Urn of ulcers.
or the bowl of questions.
Or the bowl of would you rather questions.
Okay.
That's what makes it a little less daunting.
Producer Chris loves he's really creative with the words.
Producer Chris sent us an email. Remember, Grace?
Yes, I do.
With about 30 titles for that little thing.
And they were
couldn't
amazing.
And couldn't understand why we didn't respond. And we're like, A, who cares? And B, you left no title untouched.
I
Like,
know.
there's not another title that he didn't already come up
I
with.
actually was like, I have
got
nothing to
nothing.
contribute to this
No.
because this is comprehensive.
No.
Pot of perplexity. So
Fair enough.
if you could pick three,
Oh, 3. okay.
things, and we'll just zip through them quickly.
2 and 3.
We like to do everything in threes.
Yeah. Oh,
Apparently.
there we go.
So do I open
Yes.
these?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
one at a time, if you could read the question and then
Okay.
answer.
Would you rather live without the internet or live without AC and heating?
Oh, God.
Man.
As the weather starts to get warmer now.
You know, so I'm originally from Dallas, Texas,
Mm-hmm.
where the thought of not having air conditioning is a death sentence, literally.
Yeah.
I think I would say I'd rather live without the internet because I
Okay.
can't imagine living without AC.
The AC, yeah.
And I have 700 and some odd emails in my inbox right now, so sometimes the internet is both a friend and a foe.
Yeah.
But Southern California, you don't
That's a lot of emails.
Yeah, but still, people used to, when we got here, we got hazed on our street. They're like, you're from Texas and you run your AC more than anybody else. Like, yeah, because we're used to living at 72 degrees.
Right, like you have to. It's
didn't go
like
outside.
survival.
Oh, that's
We were
fair.
just-
That's
yeah.
fair.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
All right. Next one.
awesome.
Next one is, would you rather be the reason your team lost the Olympics? Oh, gosh. Or the reason your best friend lost their job?
Oh my goodness. What the heck?
This is a pot of perplexity or whatever.
That one
the
actually
things
is a pot
were.
of perplexity.
I mean, I guess I would hope that my best friend is a lifelong friend, and so the idea of losing them their job is a little bit less palatable than costing my team the Olympics.
That's
So
your
I
country.
would
You
go
can't
with
let your
that.
country down.
I know,
So
but,
wait, so I don't understand
my best
what's-
friend is for life. So
He chooses the friend.
I'm choosing the. I would rather be the reason my team lost the Olympics.
So you're a better friend than I am.
He is, yeah.
Because if
so loyal.
it's my lifelong best friend, I feel like, dude, come on.
He'll understand.
Like-
Forgive me.
Yeah. The Olympics, there's lots of jobs. There's also lots of friends. There's only one Olympics. There's only, the chance
It is
to be.
pretty spectacular.
All right.
All right. Okay, last
Okay,
one.
last one.
Last one is: would you rather be the absolute worst bench player? A lot of sports here.
Oh, wow.
Worst bench player on a team that always wins, or the star player on a team that always loses?
That's a good one.
Man,
That's
these are
tough.
way more perplexing.
Yeah,
than-
they are,
Gosh, because I hate to lose, but to me, being the worst player at the end of the bench is kind of like
And never
losing, and
play.
then never playing. But
Yeah.
then your team.
Are you thinking professional?
to
Like in
answer
your in your
these?
mind, are you thinking you're on a professional team or like the Friday night
matter.
softball league?
Yeah, either one. Probably professional league. Like it's where my mind goes, which probably tells you something about me. I'm delusional. I don't know. I'd probably rather be the worst bench player on a team that always wins.
That always wins.
Especially at the
losing,
the-
losing constantly,
Yeah.
and then looking
Well, and if you're the best player, then they start saying you're the reason why
right that they're not winning.
that they're not winning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, come on, you're so
like more
good.
pressure.
Can't
You
build
can't-
a winner around him.
Right.
So
All right.
If
Well,
it's Friday night softball, I'd like to be the best player on the worst team. If it's NFL football, I'd rather be the worst player on the best team because you're already elite
yeah.
yeah.
at that level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I don't want to be like the worst player on the Friday night softball team.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess like,
You're
Just
like-
in it for the pizza.
You're getting nothing out of it.
I mean, it doesn't matter that we win every night. It's Friday night
know.
softball with a bunch of
Right.
out of shape 50-year-olds in there.
All right. Well, thank you for
You're
playing
welcome.
that little
You're
game with us.
welcome.
And I guess
Yeah.
it was a little bit of a
It's a
pot of
difficult game.
perplexity.
Ulcers, urn of ulcers.
Or it's an urn of
Very
ulcers.
stressful in here right now.
All right, so we're gonna lighten it up a little bit.
Okay.
Could you share in your parenting journey so far, 16 years now
Yeah.
in, what has been one or some of the most memorable moments in parenting?
A lot of memories. I think one that has stuck with me for a long time. I had this moment. I was leaving for church that morning, and I was kind of late. And I was preaching that morning, and so I'm walking to the back door. I got my hand on the doorknob, and I hear Evangeline's little pitter patter feet coming around the corner. She's kind of out of breath. She's like, "Daddy, wait!" And I'm like, "What? I gotta go. I'm about to be late." And she's like, "Daddy, are you proud of me?"
Oh,
She was 4 years old. I can still picture the little bob haircut. It was probably a homemade haircut. It probably wasn't awesome, but it didn't matter. She was beautiful anyway. And, what do you do in that moment? I told her, I can't talk right now. I need to go. And I went out and no, I didn't. We should end this episode right now if that's what I did. But I took my hand off the door. I went over and I knelt down in front of her where I could be eye level. And I told her, yes, I'm proud of you. And I told her, I named like 4 or 5 things specifically that I was really proud of. And she just beamed. And ever since then, I've remembered it. God's allowed me to carry that memory. And just the realization that I don't think our kids ever outgrow that. They're always asking that question, or maybe they stop asking the question verbally, but they're always asking it internally.
You're right.
And anyone, I think about that related to my kids, but just even people we encounter. So much is telling them that they're not enough. They're telling themselves they're not enough when they're scrolling through social media and whatnot. And so I've just tried to be mindful of that, and it's a memory that helps me, I think, be more intentional in articulating my pride in them,
Yeah.
the things that I love about them very specifically.
Well, I was just going to say that the powerful part of that conversation is that you took the time to give some specifics.
Yes.
Because, most parents would say,
Yeah.
well, of course,
Yeah.
of course. But to take the time to look her in the eye and say, and here's 3 or 4 things
Yeah.
Yes.
that I really,
that was-
I'm proud of you for,
good.
or
Yep.
here's, we don't do this kind of thing very often as parents,
Yep.
but what do we look up to in our children, right? Like for us to look our kids in the eye and say, let me tell you
Yes.
3 things about you that I admire,
Yep.
that I look up to you because you
Yeah.
have this compassion aspect,
Yep.
or you never give up.
Yep.
And I admire that.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's become a bit of a family motto for us. We have this thing in our house called the Williams Way, and a few statements about what it means to be a part of our family. And one of them is no kind thought goes unspoken. And the rule is that when we're sitting at dinner or around the house and we say something nice about someone or kind or something we appreciate, then that starts a clock. We're obligated to, the next time that we see them, to share that with them face to face. And we've just tried to instill that, recognizing
Yeah.
that it's in short supply.
That's
That's
really
amazing.
That's awesome. How it's interesting, that thread that's been going through
Yeah.
so many of our podcasts is how many parents do have some sort of family mantra,
Yes.
a set of family values, the Williams way. We had our
Your
values,
threes.
our 3,
You're like honest. I know this. Like true.
They were
true
memorable
to God,
until
true
right now.
to
Oh,
others,
thank you.
true to self.
yes, it was the Johnstons are true.
Yes.
True to God,
Yes.
true to others.
Producer
true to
Chris
self.
has the H's.
Yeah.
I have the
has it.
7 G's.
You have the 7
Yeah,
Gs.
it's the which we're still trying to figure out
Very
what they are.
Well, Jason, we are now. You're interesting season because you actually have kids in 2
Yeah.
stages.
Yeah.
But as we're working through the process, we're going to focus today in our conversation with you on Evangeline.
Okay. 13.
Because
Yeah.
you are in the 13, the middle school stage
Yeah.
of parenting, and for the sake of this conversation and on our On Purpose Parents strategy,
Yeah.
the role and goals that we want to talk about is when your children are in middle school, the role of parenting,
Yep.
we've moved from caregiver to crafter, and now in junior high, we've identified your primary role as that of a cheerleader. And oftentimes people have questioned that a little bit, because they feel like, man, in junior high, there's still so much like life coaching and discipline. And the reason why we land on cheerleader is because that's, I think in my experience, I've spent a good chunk of my ministry career working with young adolescents
Yep.
and helping moms and dads navigate that. And what I've experienced, and really when you even look at like adolescent development
Yeah.
and brain development and all the stuff, middle school is one of the first times and maybe the most crucial season where they're really beginning to form their identity and who am I really, and
Yeah.
does anybody like me, and they're starting to pay attention maybe for the first real time. For some of them it's happened earlier depending on how they are developmentally, but I'm noticing that I'm shorter than my friends, I'm taller than my friends.
Yeah.
You're moving from no cut sports to getting cut sports potentially, depending on what sport you play and where in the country you live. And so it can be very, very, very unsettling for our young teenagers
Yeah.
to feel like, do I matter? Do I fit? Do I not? And really what they need most from mom and dad. And again, you don't take off the other hats.
Sure.
Right? You're still a caregiver to
Yeah.
Evangeline. You're still her primary caregiver. You're
Yep.
still crafting Evangeline into the young woman that God's designed her to be. You're still crafting her worldview. You're still crafting the Williams way, right?
Right.
The things that matter to you.
Yep.
But you're adding this really important, maybe for a short season, primary role of being their biggest fan.
Yeah.
You're cheering them on, mom and dad.
Yep.
Junior hires, young adolescents need to know that mom and dad believe in them. They've got their back. We think you're awesome. You can do it. All the positive affirmation you can possibly give.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what we're going to focus on a little bit with
Great.
Evangeline.
Great. Yeah.
What's something in this season of parenting a young teen, 6th grade or 7th grade, Evangeline?
Seventh
7th grade.
Yep.
So you're right in the middle
Yeah.
of that
Yep.
middle school years. What's something that about this stage that you've just really appreciated it's been surprisingly fun because a lot of parents, if they have younger kids,
Mm-hmm.
they're dreading the middle school years.
Right,
They're
right.
just,
You're right.
oh my gosh. What's something for you that has been surprisingly wonderful about it?
Well, I think the surprisingly wonderful thing is we dreaded it too. We're not unlike the parents that you're alluding to, and yet our kids haven't entered a season yet, either one of them, that hasn't been our new favorite. Every stage that they've gone through, we're like, oh, we love this stage. We wish we could just kind of freeze them right here. And then they move into the next one, and we're like, oh, I'm so glad that we didn't, because then we wouldn't have experienced this. And we thought, well, that'll come crashing down in middle school, high school, and it hasn't. We enjoy our kids and watching them wrestle with and step into new spaces that stretch them.
Yeah.
I think when you watch them in middle school, we've seen them take risks that we weren't willing to take.
Right.
Which has been really fun to cheer them on into, to coach them through, to cheer them on. And so I think that's been surprising. I think the other thing that's been surprising is after that moment when Evangeline was 4, asking if I'm proud of her, this is probably the second most urgent season to communicate those things. Didn't realize how much she would need to hear those things now, because you go through a stretch of like 6 years or so where they seem self-confident, they seem like they're innocent, everything is wonderful and amazing. And then they get back into that place of really needing to hear it, because you're right, they are starting to. Evangeline was a competitive gymnast for 3 years. It's stunted her growth a little bit, and she's demonstrably shorter than her classmates. She's noticing those things. And so there is a moment where we have to speak in a little bit more intentionally to help her steady the ship in that season.
One of my most profound memories when our oldest was about Evangeline's age was in the house we used to live in. We could sit in the living room, and if our master bedroom door was open, you could kind of see up into the master. Yeah. And one afternoon I was hanging out downstairs. I looked up, and our daughter was standing in front of our like closet mirrors, and she was looking and like kind of looking at her stomach and and it was the first time where I thought, oh my goodness, she's measuring she's measuring up. She's measuring herself up to whatever standard,
something different.
to something different. And it was that moment of, oh wow, it's changing.
Yeah.
And she's paying more attention to stuff and feeling more insecure. And so it's
right. That's such an encouraging point, especially I have kids that are not yet in that stage, but quickly entering, because my oldest daughter is 11. But yeah, I love what you said about like just that positivity of that middle school stage doesn't have to be this terrible terror thing that people say. And I've actually had 2 friends this past year say, because we always say, oh, the middle school years, are you ready? Like teenage girls. And we're verbally like saying around our kids, like these kind of negative comments, like when you get to be a teenager, you know, you're going to be like this, you're going to have attitude. And a couple of friends have like called that out and said, no, like we refuse to say that because what we say can also shape the expectation.
That's
like,
right.
And it really is like parents right now about to enter that stage.
Sure.
It is kind of like frightening, and we're always kind of talking about it on negative terms.
Yeah.
So it is helpful to hear someone in that stage saying, there's beauty in here, and we are enjoying
really
this stage. Yeah.
We really have.
What has been, if you're willing to share, one hiccup, like a classic early adolescent hiccup, and how did you enjoy navigate it?
A hiccup on their part.
Well, or on your part, yeah. I mean, just
I know for me, these later years have made me question how good a parent I am, because you know, early on you're like, I'm a great parent. My kids are awesome.
Yeah, they love
whatever.
me.
Yeah. You know, and I think I probably am. I was, and I'm working on it, a better young kid parent than an older kid parent, because what I realized, and that's where I love the cheerleader language, I expected too much of my kids too quickly. They're in junior high or high school, right? Their brain, as you alluded to, is being rewired and all of that. And when they start getting bigger, I realized that I was expecting too much of them, and that's been a problem, a hiccup for me.
Yeah.
And so to really remind myself again and again that I am a cheerleader, and I need to err on the side of that, not being frustrated that they don't think about things or the world the same way I do, because they're not thinking abstractly yet. They're still piecing what that looks like together. That's been a hiccup for me. I feel like I've almost demanded too much too soon.
Right. Yeah, it is. I think that's pretty common because
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm glad I stopped by. This was really helpful.
It's been a long time. You're I mean, you're in your 40s, mid 40s.
I am. Yep.
So, but it's been a while since you were in junior high.
Yes.
Right. So we forget as parents. We forget.
Yep.
If we're not really super duper intentional, we forget about all the stuff that we navigated in middle school.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And the tendency is, as adults, for us to put adult-sized expectations on our 12-year-olds, our 13-year-olds, right? Or we think they should navigate life with the tools and the experience and the hindsight that we have.
Right.
And we've got a whole different set of tools and a whole different set of experiences. And our rear view mirror is way bigger, right?
Yeah.
So and I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, what I hear you saying a little bit is maybe you had some of those expectations on teenagers when the reality is there's just no possible way for them to be much further along than they can be at their age.
Right. And I like what you said, Kurt, about being intentional, because as the kids are growing up, they are mature in some way. So they are able to do more things.
Yep.
I've noticed this with Karis. So it's just easy to assume, oh yeah, you can do this. You can handle this. You must also be thinking the way that I'm thinking about it too.
Right.
And it's been a surprising moment for me too. Like you said, where like things come up and you're like, oh, I assumed you had more of a, certain negative intent, but you really were just like an innocent 11-year-old, you know?
Yes. That's a really good point. My daughter is wildly wise and smart beyond her years.
Yeah.
Like, I told somebody the other day, being her parent carries with it a certain level of anxiety because I see something special that I don't want to mess up. Right? And so you see some really remarkable
precious,
things, and then it's like you just sort of expect everything to be at that level, right? But they're maturing in certain areas a little bit quicker, and then others they're still 12, 13 years old, and it's easy to conflate the two.
Right.
And I think I do that.
We talk when we train our junior high volunteers, we talk about already not yet.
Yes.
And
Good. I love that
they
phrase.
live in this already not world in so many ways. They're already older teenagers. They're already little adults, but they're not yet. They're still kids.
That's good.
My buddy tells a story. He's also a junior high pastor, and he had this group of kids that they nicknamed the Pokemon punks. Okay, the Pokemon punks. And he said you would walk into their youth room, their junior high room, and there would be this group of like 8th grade boys that were dressed like punk rockers, super intimidating.
Yep.
Like really intimidating. And leaders were kind of intimidated by them and unapproachable, and they seemed older than 8th grade. And yet before church, they would sit in the corner and trade Pokemon cards. So they're already because they're punk rockers and they're a little bit bigger and a lot of what they're into is older. So they're already there, but they're not yet because they're still sitting in the corner trading Pokemon cards.
And that phrase, it might be a way to describe me as a parent too. I'm already seeing her a certain way, but I'm not yet. So for example, 6 months ago, she came and asked me if she could wear light makeup.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'm curious. What's the answer?
Yeah. So I mean, and she knew, she was very nervous.
Did she go to Joy and Joy said,
yes.
Okay.
You need to ask your dad.
Talk to your dad.
Yes.
Okay.
And I could tell she was so nervous. And I said, well, I have some questions.
Yeah.
One of which is, you seem nervous. What are you nervous about? She's like, well, I just know that I've always been your little girl.
Oh.
And I'll always be your little girl, but I think it might make you sad. And so I just wanted to ask, and I didn't know how you would react.
She is smart.
She is.
She is wise beyond her years.
So I told her,
So
I
perceptive.
said, yeah, she really is. And I'm like, well, all that's spot on. I said, I'm honestly not ready for this.
Yeah.
But if you are,
Right.
then I'm certainly willing to have the conversation. Tell me why.
Yeah.
What's driving this? What are you hoping for? Because if there's anything in you that thinks that you're not beautiful or not enough, well, I want to talk about that.
Right.
But if it's, you think you're ready, and this is something that, because she just fell all over herself to tell me how light it would be. And so it set up a really great conversation around what
so
she was
good.
thinking, what she was processing, and I was
Yeah.
already. I want you to be mature, and I expect more of you, but.
I'm not
You're
yet
my
ready.
baby girl.
Yeah,
I don't want you.
Yeah.
So not yet for me
Gosh.
too.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I think
Yeah.
I'm straddling that a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. And that's
For
such
sure.
good, right? The story that you just shared has so many good parenting tips just right there. One, you didn't get reactive, even though internally you had some
I was
thoughts.
dying on the inside.
Right.
You
I
were
was
like, oh
dying on
no,
the
what
inside.
does this mean? But you didn't get reactive.
Yeah.
And the fact that you were curious and
Yeah.
that you asked questions and you allowed her, you didn't put words in her mouth, but you allowed her to express what she's thinking and where she's coming from.
Yes.
And then being able to respond back to that with, honestly, with your thoughts too. Like, I am not ready for this. However, here's what, I'm going to go on this journey with you too. All of that. Oh my gosh. That's
Really
like
good.
masterclass right there. Beautiful.
Joy and I talk all the time. Our primary goal in this season is keep the communication lines open.
Without a doubt.
So if
Without
I
a doubt.
if I overreact or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm going to close her off. She felt safe to come to me. Now I think she feels even safer because a conversation she was dreading went way better than she thought. And so the communication lines are open, that we hope will introduce conversation around much more critical conversations than
So
Hey,
good.
I'm looking over at producer Chris and Grace. I'm thinking we need to just rename this podcast the Jason Williams Parenting Hour.
Yes, we
Like,
should.
we'll just
The
step
Williams way.
Yeah, we'll just step aside.
Give us more tips.
Just have Jason.
Keep on going.
Yeah, we'll, just,
you're
we'll banter at the beginning about
Yeah.
Chris's choice of music.
And the urn of ulcers.
Yeah, we'll banter and then we'll just
and then we'll bow out.
we'll just say take it away, Jason.
We'll pay you in chocolate chip cookies.
I will take that. You know my love language.
Well, Jason, as we look at the strategy of on purpose parents,
Yeah.
the goal that we've identified for parents in this middle school season, as you're being their biggest cheerleader, the goal is, and this is the big one. This, when you look at all the goals, this is the one where you go, oh man, this is where it starts to really matter. And this is where so much of our other parenting as caregivers and crafters, them seeing our faith and us nurturing their faith, those are the goals heading up to this.
good.
So now the goal is in middle school that they would own their faith.
Yeah.
As a parent, there comes a time, and it's pretty oftentimes in middle school where our kids need to own their own faith. The classic saying that God doesn't have grandkids, right? That we don't ride into a relationship with God on our parents' coattails. That there comes a day when, hey, we got to make this thing our own. And junior high really is that time when they need to make it their own. And when you talk to adults, I mean, the churches in America are full of adults our age who say something like this. Well, I gave my life to Jesus when I was in elementary school, when I was 4 years old, but it wasn't until junior high.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 8th grade that it really made sense to me, and I made my faith my own.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that. Are there some things, some conversations, some strategies that you enjoy or implementing?
Yep.
You know, we talk all the time about you parents need to partner with the church.
Yep.
It's not just the church's job to help your
100%.
kids, but mom and dad, you play a vital role in this. What are some things that you enjoy are doing to help Evangeline begin to own her own faith?
Yeah. I think one of the primary things that we've done with our kids, including Evangeline, is model and prioritize serving as a family. And that does a few things. I think if you're just speaking at them or sharing your perspective, which we do, I'll be in my quiet time. Just yesterday, I was reading through Luke, and there was a passage, and I marked it, and I'm like, man, after dinner, I just want to read that and get them to react around that a little bit and talk about that. So we do those things. But what we've seen and learned is when our kids are serving, there's a different level of investment and involvement that just sort of naturally occurs out of that.
Right.
They're interacting with people and they realize the difference that the ministry can make. And because of that, They have a zeal for what it looks like to serve other people, and we've just watched it. We can tell them, hey, you should have a daily quiet time. But when because they see themselves as servants and leaders, that they want to have something to give,
Right.
they lean into their time with God just a little bit more naturally. So we've really tried to make serving a priority, and wherever we go, whatever we're doing, they're always welcome. You guys know, you've seen my
Right.
daughter tagging along with me.
Right.
I never wake her up to do that. She knows she's welcome. And she's surrounded by people in those environments that love and cheer her on, which is also an intentional piece of it. We speak well of and introduce them to and casually try to put them in the spheres of people that we love and respect, knowing that those people can say the same thing that we've been saying for years, and it's going to sound like a eureka genius moment, whereas we don't know anything.
Right.
And so there's just so much in serving that I think without having to be pushy or forceful, just sort of allows kids to own their faith in ways that might be imperceptible if we're not paying attention to what's going on there.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, we all know that one of the best ways faith becomes real, moves from head knowledge into more of a heart passion, is when you are put in moments where your faith has to be put into action.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, is when, we're going to serve at the motel ministry. Or we're gonna go deliver groceries to families in our community who are struggling, or whatever it is. We're gonna serve in Sunday school class together as a mom and a dad, or I'm sorry, a mom and a daughter. And that takes it for teenagers, early adolescents, it takes it from this in children's ministry. Not exclusively, but a large part of children's ministry is what I would call is like filling up their box of information. This is the 10 Commandments. This is the fruit of the Spirit. These are the Bible heroes, and they're getting their heads and their box of information filled up.
Yes.
And we could use the word indoctrinating. You know, we're indoctrinating the young children in all this stuff. And all of a sudden they enter early adolescence, and now they need to know, like, okay, so what?
Right.
So, okay, what's this all mean?
Yeah.
And really where they learn what it all means is when you help them put their faith into action through serving and ministry involvement.
We've seen it. It makes the difference. It flips the switch from that being the church and it being my church. That being my parents' faith, that being my faith. And I just think it's such a linchpin.
Yeah.
Have you reached a point yet with Evangeline, or maybe if not with Evangeline, maybe you can speak to it with Karsten, where they're expressing, like the first time they expressed a doubt or a pushback on some aspect of faith or church?
Yeah. Do you want the example of that, or just a time when it happened?
Just a time when it happened.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Karsten is, I've always joked, he thinks 5 minutes and 5 feet in front of himself. He's an athlete, and coach told me that's a great trait for an athlete. And I'm like, you're right. It's a terrible trait for a student, but it's a great trait for an athlete to have a short memory. So in some ways, Evangeline has gotten there even before Karsten because she is so perceptible and so wise. And I would say it's probably been in the last year or so that she started asking questions, trying to piece together things that she's seeing in culture or differing perspectives and what she has grown up being taught from a biblical worldview.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I ask is because I think that scares a lot of parents when all of a sudden they start asking tough questions or pushing back against aspects of the Bible or faith or Christianity. And oftentimes parents' temptation is to try to squelch that. Right. Just, hey, well, because the Bible says so. Or because the church told us. Right. Or
Stop
whatever.
asking so many
Stop asking so many questions. And don't doubt.
Just
Don't
believe.
doubt. Just believe. And in addition to serving, I think they go hand in hand. The other one is mom and dad, when our young teenagers, and it usually happens in middle school, when they start asking the tough questions, that's another chance to be a cheerleader.
It is.
You encourage those tough questions. You cheer those questions on because they have to wrestle through that in order to hold on to it more tightly.
And what I would say, I would take that a step further and say we actually celebrate it. For two reasons. I mentioned keeping communication lines open, right? Like how you respond to that question dictates how many more of them you get.
Right.
So you want to honor that with a very gracious response. But one of the reasons that we celebrate it is, for many people, they start asking those questions in college.
Yes.
When they're out and without sometimes a biblical voice or someone who cares and loves them, leaning into that conversation alongside of some of the other inputs they're getting. So if we can have that conversation earlier in junior high and high school, we'll take it. Because we can be in a running conversation with them as opposed to them being on their own. That's what happened to me. I went to college before I had that conversation. And it was really scary because I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. And it would have been great to have been able to have a mentor from home or my parents and I didn't. And so we want to create that space for it to happen before then so that we can be a part of that conversation.
So good. One thing that's so beautiful about your keeping communications open mindset and philosophy is that is how real, authentic cheerleading that makes a difference in the kids can happen. Because if you don't have that, safe space where your daughter can come ask you a question about makeup or even maybe about faith or about doubt, then you don't really know what's going on deep inside their mind. And then how can you really cheerlead them in the areas that they're having the most maybe insecurities or doubts worry? And so that's just how you tie that together is just so beautiful that, practically for parents listening, kind of implementing some of the things that you've modeled for us in your stories, just being open, keeping communication open, the lines open, but then also living out examples by serving and inviting them in, not pressuring them. It's not an obligation. It's not a duty, and creating naturally the environment or spaces where they can practice. It's pretty awesome. So I'm on board for the Williams show. Well, as we wrap up our time this morning, for our listeners who are parents who have kids in this stage, or maybe parents like me who have kids that are about to enter this stage and typically hear about all the negatives about it, and maybe feeling apprehensive, any word of advice or final encouragement you want to leave to our listeners?
No, I mean, I think some of the things that we've touched on, I would, keeping those communication lines open. And I think something I alluded to but didn't say, embrace this journey. I mean, it is, I think I said the new season has always been a favorite. And then we look back on it and we realize some of the things that God did that we didn't even recognize were going on. And so even when you're in these moments and you feel like, I'm trying to embrace, I'm trying to keep the communication lines open, nothing's really happening. So often we've experienced our kids a year or two down the road pointing to a season where we felt like failures as parents. It's like, gosh, I feel like we're blowing it. I wish there were a recipe or something that we could follow and we can't. And then God gives us sort of kind reminders through the kids that there was actually a whole lot more going on in that season than we ever recognized.
That's good.
And so I think if you're struggling through a season as a parent, just to keep that in mind, that if we're faithful and lifting our kids up in prayer and intentional about being in relationship and conversation with them, good things are happening even when we don't always realize it.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Well, everybody, wow, this was a little...
It's a masterclass.
A masterclass, a gold mine.
Parenting masterclass.
It was fantastic. If you are a parent of an young teenager, or you know someone who is, this would be a podcast worth passing around to share with your friends who are in a similar stage of life. Because if you take the time to really listen to this, Jason dropped
Gold nuggets.
dozens of little parenting nuggets that I think are worth sharing with our friends. So thanks for joining us, Jason.
Thanks for
being here.
Thank you,
weekend.
guys. It is a big weekend. We're headed into
16.
birthday bonanza.
That's
We're
fantastic.
excited. Producer Chris, thank you.
Yes.
Yay.
Chris, as always.
Bye, everyone.